we stay informed and true.
Hey guys, it's Joel with Coreware. Welcome back to Compliance Corner. We've been kind of busy lately. That's why you've probably not seen an episode. Got so many things going on here at Coreware. We've got shows coming up. We've got it's a beehive of activity, and but we're back today, and we're going to talk about what are we talking about? We're going to talk about this executive order, right, Tony?
Right. And this is something I meant to cover a while ago. Like you said, things get busy. There's been shows and stuff and all of that. And then, of course, the elephant in the room, there was the hubbub of the upcoming election. So we now have an outcome to that. So we can start trying to look into the future, see things, how we'll go. So there's a specific executive order that I wanted to talk about before, because, again, the toss-up of how that's going to affect things coming up or how that's going to play into the election, I thought was going to be interesting, and there's some things in that to look for. So if we could pop this screen up real quick to show this. So this was an executive order issued by our current president on September 26, 2024, combating what he's calling emergency firearms threats and improving school-based active shooter drills. So a big part of this is, again, that school-based active shooter stuff where they're wanting to come up with recommendations on how to improve response to active shooters and how to conduct consistent drills and come up with some standardization for schools to use. Okay, that's one point. But let's talk about what he brings up as the emerging firearms threats. I'll learn to talk today. What they're referring to here specifically is they're targeting what is the proliferation of the Glock trigger or the Glock switches and the 3D printed devices that'll convert a firearm into being full auto. Now, don't get me wrong. Here in the Phoenix area I live, and I know some guys in the law enforcement world that says these are becoming a big thing. There's a lot of the people you may not want to have these things are getting a hold of them, and they're getting a hold of them in widespread use. So I'm not saying, as I've talked about this, that I don't have concerns that needs to be addressed. But when I look at things like this executive order and the recommendations they're seeking, I start to look and start to wonder of what kind of precedents, legal precedents and things like that, those recommendations can set if they go from recommendation into activity. And specifically, if you get into the nuts and bolts of this, they're talking about how to deal with the import-export of these devices coming in and out of the country. But they're also talking about how they're being produced in the country, particularly with 3D printers. And that leads them into seeking recommendations from this group he's established with this executive order. He's seeking recommendations on how to deal with things like seizing 3D printers, how to deal with things like seizing the data files that are used to create 3D printers. So in my head, I start thinking, well, we already have a Fourth Amendment. We already have laws and rules on search and seizure. We already have laws and rules in place for dealing with illegal machine guns. So I start to think in my head, it's kind of like, okay, what else are they going to try to do? When dealers do things illegally, there's steps and processes and due process that goes through for a company to come in and deal with that, and for law enforcement to deal with that and everything and take care of that. And I'm wondering where these recommendations are going to go and what kind of precedent, if they're just going to target, and if they can use any kind of legal precedent set to just target that data or those 3D printers individually. So it'll be something interesting to see. The deadline on this was actually 90 days from the date this was issued. So they're expecting these recommendations that would put that around Christmas, which at the time was post-election, but pre-inauguration. So it's still post-election, pre-inauguration. And my thought as the time pre-election was going to be, are you positioning a certain candidate to continue a certain kind of anti-gun rhetoric as they go on? But now with the change of election, I'm curious how are they going to use these recommendations that come out to put pressure on the new elected president. So that's the other aspect I'm going to be interested. Now, of course, not to be left out, New York passed Senate Bill 7365, which did the exact same thing, targeting, again, going after those Glock switches and triggers. They also passed some laws and rules about putting warning labels on gun stores. So more just making life miserable for dealers. But they're targeting this as well. And I'm curious, if you were curious like me and wondering, why are these such a big things to be dealing with as an executive order or as in new state laws that are going to start being passed? And I think it's a lot of because of this. This was a case that got decided about a month before that executive order came out, the United States versus Tamori Morgan. And this came out of the District Court of Kansas. Tamori Morgan was caught with a Glock switch and a Glock. So he had the device and a Glock. They weren't installed, but he also had an AR-15 style pistol, I believe 300 blackout, with a similar device installed to make it full auto. He got arrested on possession of illegal machine guns, went to court, and the District Court of Kansas dropped the case, dismissed the charges. And they did so specifically quoting using things like the Bruin measure and stuff like that from previous Supreme Court rulings, stating that machine guns are a bearable arm and that he wasn't technically shouldn't have been violating any law. So again, I'm not getting into all the nuts and details. I'm trying to just summarize these really fast, but that's a really interesting case present out of the district court. Will United States attorneys appeal it? Probably. But again, that's a really interesting precedent that we have, precedent that we have in August. We have a ruling stating that machine guns are bearable arms. And then in September, we have an executive order going, let's target these devices that make things machine guns. And then maybe right after, we start to see those certain anti-gun states start to pass state laws to target those specific devices. So I'm curious to see where this is going to go now, particularly post inauguration, and seeing what happens in the future.
So I guess from my perspective, watching everything that's been playing out, I think things will probably change a little bit.
It's possible.
Yeah. And on the extreme, I think they could change in an extreme way. But on the other hand, depending on, the climate politically, things could just stay the same. So I think it's still up in the air. My gut tells me we'll see significant changes. I don't know what they'll be, but when you have that first exec.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Joel. But the one thing we know now, there's a new administration coming. So with a new administration will come a new attorney general. And we don't, and the impact that'll take. Now, will that bleed down into a new ATF director? We don't know. We don't know how far they'll take that. But both the attorney general and the ATF director being appointed positions, I mean, that's a potential an entire shakeup that we can hope returns us back to some kind of normalcy that was pre this no tolerance policy, insanity, and all of that.
So, and just to point out, when you have a vice president come out and clearly state, and this may offend some people out there, but it is what it is, that the ATF needs to just go away. That's kind of a big deal. And that team won. And they won handily. So if they see that as a they're saying, hey, this is a mandate, right? This is like this is nationwide popular vote, electoral college. It seems they may have free reign to do some cutting. And with Elon being the person that he is, and I've never seen someone of his caliber talking about the First and Second Amendment. I mean, that's just taboo these days.
Yeah.
And he'll be heading up the DOGE, right? The Department of Government Efficiency. Hey, you never can tell what's going to happen. But when they see something like I see, if someone with common sense sits down and looks at that executive order, and you talk about, well, where's this going to lead? Basically, just for people that may not understand, they're basically saying, let's talk about speech for a second. If you have a printer and a stack of paper, they can take that, whether you've done anything with them or not, right? Because the paper, it would be like the plastic, that you would feed through a 3D printer, and then the 3D printer would obviously be the printer. So it's some weird stuff. I think it's draconian. Right. I think that, I've always been of the opinion that we need to educate and not legislate. I think an educated populace is
100%.
so much, so much better than a legislated, populace where it's just people are stupid. We're just all stupid. I mean, me included. So we can't legislate our way out of, common sense. Common sense has to rule. So
The other thing is life is so different for each one of us and where you live in the country and what your environment is
absolutely.
like. So, and we all know laws are commonly passed in the big cities. Life in big cities is not life in rural America and other parts of the country. And I
Right.
think that's largely forgotten. And again, the moving forward with things of that finding that common ground, that becomes an important part of that discussion too, because there's got to be some give and take.
Right. And maybe we'll get back to the original intent of our country, of our documents. I mean, it was always, from the beginning, it should have been the federal government protecting the rights of the people against the states. And now,
Yep.
For the past decades, you've had states having to step up and say, no, like Texas, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to do this. And hopefully we get back to those days where it's not the federal government that's coming down on people. It should be the state government, because that's our most immediate fix when it comes to any problems that we have. You just go to the city hall and let's fix things there, instead of depending on some faraway bureaucracy to read it, try to read everybody's mind and make everything good for everybody. It just doesn't work. I mean, Reagan understood it. Hopefully we're getting back to that understanding that we need to take responsibility back in our own hands and just be an adult,
Right.
right? Just be an adult. That's all you have to do is just be an adult. So, hey, so I know we're wrapping this one up, Tony.
Yep.
And we haven't talked in a while. Hopefully you have some fresh material for me. Do you have any parting words?
Never forget Peanut and Fred.
Oh man. Fred, my goodness. I don't know if you saw or not, but when I think when Kamala was giving her concession speech, did you see that?
Yeah.
If I can find it out, it'll be playing right now. But a squirrel actually ran across the stage, and we're like, man, if that's not like
Yep.
prophetic,
It's gonna be the rebellion.
squirrels got their payback. So,
Yep.
but anyway, guys, thank you for joining us. We'll be back hopefully in a day or two, and we're just going to continue bringing you some content. Hopefully everything's calming down now from the perspective of us at Coreware and the nation. It has been, I feel like I'm living in the Twilight Zone right now with everything going on. It's just, it's like so much has happened in so short a time. It's kind of hard to take everything in, but we are going to get back on track. We're going to be providing some good information, and Tony, hopefully in our next episode, we'll have better parting words and more uplifting parting words rather than Peanut and Fred. So with that, we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you, guys.
Welcome to the Compliance Corner, where we stay informed and true, navigating the rules together to keep our freedom shining through.